I'm your host, Deborah Carney, and I am joined this evening by fiction author David McAvoy. Hi, David. How are you?
I'm doing just fine, Deborah.
I am pleased that you were able to join us tonight and talk about your book. And before we get started, why don't you give our listeners a little bit of background about yourself?
Let's see. I'm the author of Swords and Sails: The Legacy of the Red Lion, which is the first in a series of books that's about pirates. Basically, it's sort of a adventure fantasy setting. Let's see. There's not much to tell. I'm from Arkansas, if you can't tell from the accent. Let's see. I really just started with this book. I'm really surprised that it's gotten out there, that it's getting the response that it seems to be getting. Before this, I was in law school briefly. It didn't work out, and so I just put this on paper, and it seems to be turning things around for me. I'm pleasantly surprised to say.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about your book? You said it's about pirates and fantasy and things.
Right. The Legacy of the Red Lion focuses in on the story of a young man named Edward Reynolds. Edward is 16. He's living in this gloomy seaside village called Danscombe. He just hates his life there. And he's always dreaming about seeing the world on the high seas. But it gets a little more than he bargained for when these pirates come to his house one night, take something that his father, who he never knew, had left behind for him. And he ends up on this pirate ship called the Cerberus, which is captained by a very notorious pirate named Cornelius Wolfang, who Edward finds out was an old rival to his father.
Okay.
And, they end up sailing about the world. It's set in our world with a few additional fictional locations added. Facing sea monsters and all sorts of magical things, other pirates, of course. There's a lot of good sword fights, a lot of adventure and action. And they're looking for some mysterious treasure that Edward's father left behind. Okay. Now, Edward's determined to find out what this treasure is. He's determined to keep it out of Captain Wolfang's hands. Mm-hmm. But to do this, of course, he's going to have to survive everything he encounters. So it makes for a pretty fun read, I think.
It does sound like a really fun read, and I actually know a couple of people who are really big into pirates, so I know right away a couple people that'll read this.
Hey, that's great.
And is it let's talk a little bit about how you came up with the story. So you were in law school and you didn't like what you were going through and it was too boring, and all of a sudden one day you said, hey, I've got a story I want to write. Or how did that actually go about?
I won't say it was boring, but I will say I was getting mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and almost physically clobbered every day by the workload. But there were a lot of different things going on that year. We had an illness in our family. My grandmother died, and I was going through law school, trying my best to make it work, and it just wasn't working out. And at some point, this story just kind of waltzed its way into my head, and I'd always written little short stories and stuff to kind of escape from life, just kind of a healthy way of coping with problems. But this story wouldn't go away, and I kept, in my free time, I would sit there thinking about it, and it would just keep getting more elaborate until the point that it grew into what I realized would be a series of novels if I actually sat down and wrote them. So I started tinkering with the first story, and next thing I know, it's a 315-page novel.
Wow. Well, and that's really cool, because now one of the other things I usually like to ask authors, because there's so many different ways of writing, did this come to you like in a flow, or did you like have a little outline that you set out first, or did it just tell itself to you?
Well, a little bit of both. The general stuff just kind of came in, and I always do outline my stories and get an idea, sort of a roadmap of where I'm going.
Okay.
But It really always amazes me how characters, when you're writing, and the world that you're writing itself can just kind of come to life on its own and become sort of this organic growth where it's more than just your creation. It becomes sort of a living, breathing thing in its own right. And these characters, with each thing that I wrote, they seemed to grow a little more. And before long, I realized that they were kind of telling me their story as it went. I'd sort of given the foundation, and they were just growing from there.
Cool. Now, a question that I have for you is, how did you talked about your publisher, who is publishing your book, and how did you come about, however it is you're being published?
Well, my publisher is Mikazuki Publishing House out of California, Los Angeles, California. When I was first trying to figure out how to publish this, I will be the first to tell you I had no idea what I was doing. So I sat down and I researched it, and of course, I found out just how hard it is to get something published. I mean, I was doing the research, and it said, get your agent, get them to take it to one of the established publishers. You'll probably have to pay them X amount of dollars. I'm sitting there looking at this going, I'm broke. I'm hoping this might make money. This cannot work this way.
Right.
And a friend of mine was actually really kind of cynical about the whole process. He said, just why don't you just go and self-publish on and put something out as an ebook and try to generate it that way. And I told him, well, that's great, but I have no idea how I would market something like that. This is, all new territory for me.
Right.
So I shopped around. I didn't give up. I sent it to a couple different publishers. One of them, and I won't name names here, but they were an established publisher. They eventually wrote me back, said they were very interested in the book if I was willing to pay them 4 figures to get it published.
Yeah, no.
But just the write-up that they gave me told me, okay, I have something here.
Right.
Now, my publisher, with Mikazuki Publishing, we sat down, we talked about a contract. They were nice enough to work with me on all the things I had concerns about. And, eventually we got the book published as a paperback, as an ebook for Kindle.
Okay.
We're going to do a hardback. And they've really given me everything I wanted, everything I've needed, and been there to guide me every step of the way. They're kind of a new publishing company, I guess. It's been maybe around about a year, but they really do a lot to help their authors. They really have a different take than what I think is what I've come to think is kind of the stale approach to publishing that so many of the established publishers use now. And they were willing to take a chance on an unknown writer who, just came to them with a 315-page book and said, hey, let's try to get this published. I really couldn't be happier, and I would recommend Mikazuki Publishing House to anyone who's got a good book that they want to try to get published.
Now, your journey to get a publisher was really incredible, and I thank you for sharing that story. And now, if someone were just getting... someone is in your position, they're in the position you were in, they're like in school doing something they're not really like, they're in a job that they're not really sure about, they've got a story, they don't know if they should tell it. What would be your advice to them?
My advice for them is, just, follow your dreams, be willing to do the hard work necessary to, get that out there. A lot of people don't realize, it's not back-breaking labor to sit down and write a book, but it is a lot of hard work of another sort, and it's a lot of time devoted that could be going other places. But if you're willing to do the work to get it done, and you really want to do this, and you believe in what you have to offer and believe in yourself, go for it. Just if you're willing to do that, don't let anything stand in your way, is what I'd say.
That's awesome. And now, I was just thinking when you said work, now you said the story kind of came to you, however, you probably, I'm thinking, had to do some research into some of the story points and storylines.
Yes.
Why don't you tell us about that a little bit?
I wanted to make the book somewhat historically accurate. I mean, there's sea monsters and a sea witch and so many other things. I'm not sure. It probably had a very low threshold for being historically accurate there. But
right.
I wanted to find out as much about pirates as I possibly could, which it wasn't a subject I knew a great deal about. I just had the idea for this story. And so I went digging, and I found out all these fun little facts. One of my favorite bits of trivia that I found, which actually worked wonderfully with the book. Well, let me start this way. When I set this out, I had in mind that I was going to have several strong female characters in this story.
Okay.
Anne Lindsay, the first mate aboard the Cerberus, is a 16-year-old woman. The sea witch I mentioned earlier, her name is Kana. Then there's a woman named the Crimson Pirate, or Cassandra is her real name, but she's the deadliest pirate on Earth. And I wanted to do this because I think the damsel in distress thing is just so overdone. Yes, it's. I joke these days, it's high time the princess in the Mario games installed a security system or something. It's just, Bella or whatever her name is needs to dump the sparkling vampire and, get a head on her shoulders, whatever.
Right.
But, I went to put these strong female characters in this novel. And as I was doing research, I actually found, there were a lot of female pirates that, a lot of people don't know about. I mean, there were some really fascinating historical figures who, were women who, for whatever reason, took up piracy and did a lot of extraordinary things. But I was just blown away by it. So, now I have this story that has, these women who are, cutting down the men left and right with swords and, occasionally rescuing a few of them. And, if anyone wants to say, well, that's unrealistic, we could just say, well, no, your view of history and the world is unrealistic.
Wow.
And your view of women, I might add.
That's really cool. And it's really cool that you were able to find all that to back your stories up, because now that gives you content for promoting your book and your series, and gives you like a leverage to a platform to leverage yourself from. You can share some of those stories as from your research as to be backstory for your book. And you said it's set in current time, or it is set in the past?
Well, it's set in roughly around 1680, which was kind of in the golden age of pirates, the age of buccaneers. And the series is set in that time. There's a lot of elements, as I alluded to before. There's a lot of places in that time period, according to these books, that aren't in our present day geography. So as to why, well, readers will just have to keep up with the series as it develops and find out why some of these places are no longer with us. So,
I like it.
Well, I'm glad. I hope plenty of people do, hopefully.
And everybody loves the romance of that era. Pirates were mean and they killed people and they, took things. But on the other hand, there's that whole, escaping to the high seas and living, this fantasy, off on the boat. So I think that it's a world that folks will want to jump into and escape from our world for a while or two.
A friend of mine, a very good friend of mine, been friends since junior high school, went and bought a copy of the book. Well, her mother knows me very well, and we, love each other to death and everything. And she saw it, and she made her daughter buy her a copy just to have. Apparently, according to my friend, her mother never reads a book. She's bought books for her before. She'll get through the first page, set it aside. Devoutly religious woman, even has her Bible on audio just because she doesn't like to read.
Okay.
She got this book, and I don't know if it was just because of her relationship to me or, she says she genuinely loved the book and it held her. But she started reading it and kept reading it. Eventually it got to a point she was like devoting a specific time of her day to sit on her back porch and read this story. And then when it was all done, she called me herself and just wanted to talk all about the book, how she'd read all the way through it, wanted to discuss every detail. And her daughter is constantly sending me little text messages and stuff all through this process about how she's just amazed that her mother is reading and looking forward to a sequel and all this other stuff. So for me, that moment alone made this all worth it.
Yep, you were able to reach someone with a story that they really wanted to hear and that they really enjoyed, and that's really awesome. And hopefully, we'll get a lot of people to pick yours up. It sounds fascinating to me, and it wasn't at all what I thought when I started the podcast. So,
do you mind if I ask what you thought?
Actually, when you said pirates, I figured men.
Mm-hmm.
and sword fights and bombing.
There's some of that
and all that, and I figured fantasy, sea monsters and witches and mermaids and all that kind of thing. But I didn't expect to hear women as main characters and that type of thing. So I think that your book is going to appeal to a lot more people because, like you said, it's not your typical damsel in distress. And it's more about people rather than being male or female. It's about people fighting for survival. Okay.
So what you'll find in this story is a being called a Selkie. Now, for people that aren't familiar with mythology, they may not know what a Selkie is, but to find out, they're going to have to read this book.
You're not going to tell me?
No, you're going to have to read the book. You're going to have to find out. But it's very, I think it's very interesting. I love mythology, love mythical beings and stuff. But if you want to find out, there's a whole chapter in there that revolves around this creature called a Selkie.
Okay. So. You've got me hooked.
That was my intent.
I know. You got me hooked. Hopefully you'll get a few of our other listeners hooked. So this has all been great. I want to thank you so much for being on our podcast and sharing all your wonderful stories. And if you ever want to be on again just to talk about, how to structure a series or this type of story, we'd love to have you back.
Well, anytime you want me, message me, and I'll clear out some time to come. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity, and I will certainly be back when we get the sequel out.
Oh, yes, totally, because by then I'll have read the first one, and I'll want a preview of the second one.
Okay, sounds good to me.
All right, now where can people find you on the internet? You have an author website, or?
Right now I'm spending most of my time on Goodreads, which I am absolutely in love with. I have an author profile on there. Speaking of Goodreads, I need to get this out. We're doing a book giveaway, one signed paperback copy of Swords and Sails, The Legacy of the Red Lion. I think about 215 people have already signed up. And it's, you can do this in the U.S., Canada, Great Britain, or Australia. Like I said, just one copy. This goes through October 15th. We'll be doing another one of these. Or at least I'm planning on doing another one of these when the hardback copy comes out. And for those that don't want to wait to the 15th to get the book, my Mikazuki publishing house is doing a really cool promotional deal. If you want to get the paperback copy and then take a picture of yourself with the paperback and send it into Mikazuki Publishing House, you'll be entered into a contest to win a silver and diamond skull and crossbone pendant. That's real nice. I think it's absolutely gorgeous. We're doing that through up to December 1st, I believe it is, just in time for the holiday season. If someone wants to get in on that, and if they don't win the pendant, the book might make a good Christmas present too.
I love it. I love it. And